Hello, and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today, from my cold little office here in suburban Norway, I'm reaching across the ocean to a little island in Maine, I believe, to talk to. Well, Duane, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Duane MacLeod, and I do live on a island on the coast of Maine. We're not way out to sea. There is a bridge that connects us. And I have a little bespoke tailoring business that I run out of my house here in Maine.
Now, as is my tradition, I would like to go back, well, quite a bit to your formative years because I'd like to sort of hear how you got into tailoring because, as I understand it, it is a relatively recent venture.
Eh, yeah. Um, I have to I have to go way back. You know, I grew up in a very DIY kind of family. Uh, both my both my father and my mother grew up on small family farms here in Maine. And when I think back about their lives, I realize how incredibly self-sufficient they were and how talented they were. And so I I kind of grew up in a family of makers. And my mom was our Cub Scout den leader. Cub Scouts is sort of a little organization here in Maine, or in the United States rather. And she, the boys in my neighborhood would come over to my house like one afternoon, and my mom would have a project for us to work on. And so from a really early age, I've always been interested and really drawn to just making things. And that just is something that has never really left me. Uh, after going, after going to college, I got married, um, and my wife and I and some friends, we built a house. I mean,
Oh,
we built we built a timber frame house here in Maine, um, and I think it was like a huge project. But we just had a kind of a can-do attitude, and so I just have continued to make stuff after making the house. Um, my daughter was going to an art college in California, and she started out as a fashion design major. And I was like complaining to her one day about how really boring men's winter coats were. Everything was everything was at that time. Everything was black. Everything was pretty unimaginative, I thought. And she came back to me and she said, "Well, Dad, why don't you just make yourself a coat?" And you know, I knew how to use a sewing machine. We had done things like, reupholstering old furniture, or, like making a slip cover, or even like making curtains for our first apartment. I think they were tie dyed. That
so
was.
this would be sort of in the 70s.
Does that does that tell you something? Uh, does that age me? Anyway, Uh, wow. I found this book. Um, it's a Japanese sewing pattern book called Men's Coats,
Okay.
and it has this really. If people aren't familiar with these Japanese sewing books, they always have really amazing photography
Mm.
in them. Really, really seductive photography. Makes everything look really great. Anyway, there was this coat. It's called Men's Coats, and on the cover is this like a close-up detail of what looks like a Burberry trench coat.
Uh,
It's really really amazing. I saw this thing and I thought, holy cow, can somebody really make that? Could you like really make that? So I bought that book. So I bought the book, and it's sort of like IKEA. It's all in illustrations. And this is back, I think I started this back at, I think in 2010, like so 16 years
Okay.
ago now. And there wasn't the kind of translation technology that we have now.
No.
Right, the whole thing is in Japanese. I couldn't read any of it. Um,
Yeah.
and but I could follow the pictures, right? So I would I would just like look at the pictures, and they're all kind of line illustrations, line drawings, and try to figure out what it was trying to tell me, right? And all of the pattern pieces come on one big sheet of paper, one huge sheet of paper, and they're all overlapping each other.
Yeah.
It's just like a big scramble of lines everywhere. And so I thought, uh, I identified the pieces that I needed to make. I was going to make the toggle coat
Hmm.
out of this book, because I thought it looked like the easiest one.
Mm.
So, so I thought it looked like the easiest one, and I and so I found kind of put the puzzle together, and got all the pieces, and and then I found out that like Japanese men are much smaller than most of us.
Mm.
And so even like the extra large size of this thing, there was no way that I was going to be able to wear it. It was like, uh, and um, oh man, technology has changed so much. So I'm kind of like in this quandary, right? I don't know really what I'm doing. And so I go to Google and try to and I think I must have looked up something like men who are sewing, or men who are trying to sew. And and the first thing that pops up is a website called Male Pattern Boldness. And and there's a lot to talk about here. Anyway, um, this is a website created by a guy in New York City, Peter Lappin, who really I consider him to be like the godfather of sewing for men. He he really what he was able to create, and the community of people that he built is still it is still in a way still exists today, even though he's not doing any sewing to my knowledge. And the blog, and this is back in the blog days,
Mm.
right? This is blogging. This is before reels. This is before ever all of
Yeah.
this stuff, right? And and so here's this guy in New York City who has a blog, and he is also trying to teach himself how to sew. And and it was the blog was, first of all, it was very humorous. It was just a total delight to read. It was just funny, and it was fun. And and I think people just really identified with the whole thing that we were all trying to do. We were just all trying to figure this thing out. And and so I don't know how many he has amassed an enormous following. And eventually he had a shirt sew along. And it's like I had made this toggle coat, but I had never made a shirt. And so it was like it was like, okay, I'm gonna use this one pattern, and I don't really remember what he was using. And it was like, if you want to follow along and get it, you can do it, or you can just, get another pattern and and together we're all going to make these shirts. I have no idea how many people were involved, but he set up like, I guess what you would call like a forum,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, he was able to build this community of people like me that were trying to figure out all of these problems. It was just like, I was making like a shirt from, I don't know, a big baggy button down shirt, probably from the 1960s, I think, maybe it was. And, I had all kinds of fit issues, but we had a forum and we could ask questions. And, of course, some of the people were really knowledgeable and they wrote back. It was like a person wrote back to me and said, well, you need like a sloped shoulder adjustment. And I'm going, well, what the hell is that? And, and but somebody else would chime in and said, oh, this is how you do it. Here, go look at this blog, and there's somebody over here that's doing it. So it was a huge learning experience. So that's sort of where my clothing, making started. And once I got going, I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop. I just wanted to be learning more and getting better all the time, just kind of trying to just get my tech to be more accurate, to be, to just understand
Yeah.
more of what I was doing.
Did you ever finish the toggle coat? I noticed you sort of skipped past
Oh,
that
yeah,
bit.
I did. Oh my God, yes, I did. Yeah, I did. I still wear the toggle coat, but I was complaining about dull clothes, and what did I pick? Like charcoal gray. Anyway, anyway, yeah, I finished the toggle coat. I finally, I figured it out, and I still wear it, And in fact, so there were four jack coats in that book, and I eventually made all of
Oh.
them. And some of there were some successes and some failures. One of them was like a double-breasted pea coat, and I hated it.
Ah.
And I picked some really awful fabric. Oh, back at way back then, we're going way back here. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on any of this stuff, so I was always looking for, inexpensive fabric. And I thought I bought this wool fabric, but I think it was probably 99% polyester.
Mm.
And it was just, and I just hated the coat. I eventually gave it away. And it didn't, I also learned that I just look really stupid in double-breasted things. So I avoid them like the plague. It's not for
It
me.
is tricky.
Uh,
I
that's
have the
tricky.
same thing
Yeah.
with double-breasted. If I wear them open, it's okay. All done up,
Yeah.
just does not feel right.
No, it the yeah, I'm not a really tall guy. I'm not really big. It just looked ridiculous. I just thought I looked ridiculous in it.
Mm.
Anyway, I still have the toggle coat, and yeah, I've worn it a lot this winter. Um, anyway, uh, so that's kind of how I got started sewing. But sort of when you're doing it, when you're making these things, you're thinking about, man, what would it be like to make like a tailored jacket, or like, I wonder what it's like to make a whole suit. And it's like tailoring is just like that. I don't know. It's like Mount Everest. It's like it's like it's there,
Yeah.
right? It's because it's there, right? And so it's out there, kind of looming on the horizon, and you're going, man, I wonder what it takes. What do you have to know to do that? To do that kind of work. Um, so, uh, being the person that I am, I guess I bought um, basically a men's tailoring textbook,
Mm-hmm.
and it's by a guy Roberto Cabrera, and it's it's well known. It's sort of like I don't know, maybe it's the Bible of men's tailoring. I don't know, but um, it again is it's a step by step. It kind of holds you by the hand to take you through this whole process of tailoring a tailored jacket. And um, a lot of what's unique about tailoring and a part that I really love about it is like all of the specialized fabrics that go into making a tailored garment, all of the kind of I don't know what to call them, secret fabrics that are hiding
Yeah.
inside. And I had never experienced any of those. And I had to go to New York City to find them, right? And so, I walk into a, a a store there. It's called Steinloff and Stoller, and it's in the garment district. And it's for tailors, and it has all of these, all the specialized fabrics, the canvas and the horsehair, and all of this stuff. And I, I was just. I was just enthralled with the whole thing. I really was. I, you know, all of these different fabrics that I had never seen before, right? I think the horsehair is made with like horse's tail, actual
Oh.
tails or their manes or something, and it makes this springy fabric.
Yeah.
It's a spring. You can't crease it. So that here's so I got all of these special things, and I followed this book, the Cabrera book, and I was able to make like a tailored jacket. And it all just clicked with me. It was so construction oriented. I just felt like I was really building something. I wasn't. It was like, almost like building a house. It was like it was one bit at a time, and it eventually kind of comes together. And I don't know. It was something about that whole process. It just really, I could really relate to it. Um, and so I continued to just, you know, plod along. I just kind of work from one project to another. Then, I got to the point where I said, man, I would like to have like a completely me made wardrobe. I should add that, my career, I was a registered nurse. And so I wore a uniform to work all the time. I never had to worry about what I was going to wear. I just, I had navy blue scrubs, wore them every time I went to work. So, so I never, I didn't need to have like, like a work
Mm.
wardrobe. Um, so, most of I thought, wow, I should just like make all the clothes that I wear when I'm not at work. I can make a shirt, I can make a pair of trousers. Um, and so I just kind of continued to work around along that way. And I guess, I don't know if you say in the background, I guess technology was zooming ahead, right? And all of a sudden there's Instagram and you're, seeing things that you've never seen before. So, I open up Instagram someday, and here's this picture of this place called the Tailoring Academy, and and it's in the and it's up in what looks like this loft, and there are all of these this huge beamed ceiling and skylights and light pouring in, and there's like maybe six students like learning to be tailors. And I just thought, oh my god, this is like my fantasy. This is like this is like my this is like my dream. This is my dream world. It just I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I started going down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out how could I ever do this? And I remember I wrote to the woman that was running this tailoring school, and that's Britta, and Britta Hirsch, and I remember writing to her and saying, I'm this guy in the United States, and how could I ever come and do this? And she wrote me this really lovely rejection letter
Oh,
saying basically, yeah, saying, it's not possible for anyone other than a UK student to come here. I'm sorry, uh, kind of thing. And um, so I kind of, I just kept going, right? I just, I go, oh man, that would have been a
yeah.
dream, right? It would have been a dream come true. Anyway, eventually, Britta offered like an online course on how to draft a jacket. And I saw it. I don't remember how I became aware of it. But it was gonna take place over Zoom. We'd entered the Zoom world by
Mm.
that time. Uh, it was going to take place over Zoom, and it was gonna run like on Fridays for like maybe four consecutive Fridays, and and I thought, oh my God, I've got to do this. I got to do this. So I got somebody to where Fridays was always a day that I worked. So I switched days with one of my coworkers so that I could be home on Friday. And and I did this online drafting course with with the guy Quentin Felix, who's sort of the main tutor there at the Tailoring Academy. And there were four of us in this class, and uh, and one of them was a gal named Kelly, and she was an expat. She was originally from Texas, um, but I believe she's now a UK citizen. Anyway, she was in this class, so there were just four of us, and you know we we went through the process. We went through the process of drafting like a jacket, in a on wherever on your kitchen table, whatever, it's just like, and uh, but I never did anything. I didn't, I did the draft, but I never did anything with it. It just, it never happened. Well, eventually, Kelly, the gal that was in this class with me, ended up going to the Tailoring Academy full time, and she sent me a message, um, and it kind of came out of the blue. And she says, "You have got to cut. You have got to come and do this. You've got to come and do this. This is unbelievable. You got to come do it." Um, but I still couldn't. Right? I still couldn't go there. So Britta devised a way to basically break the year. It's a pretty much a all year program, to break it into 2 6-month periods so that people from outside the UK could come on a tourist visa.
Ah,
And so it made it all possible. Um, I was hoping to work like another year. COVID had come, COVID had gone. I'd worked through the whole thing. I thought I wanted to work another year, but the opportunity came up to be a student at the Academy, and I just said, you know what, I think I would much rather go to tailoring school than work another year. And so I put in my application, I got accepted, and I retired in June, and the early in that following September, boom, I was on my way. It was it's just an unbelievable experience.
from Maine to Macclesfield.
Mail to from Maine to Macclesfield. Yes,
So what was
yeah.
it like to arrive in Macclesfield?
Oh my gosh, it was so funny. I was coming through you had to come through the border. I didn't realize, I'd really never been anywhere. I had never been to the UK. I'd never been to Europe. So I wasn't, so I'm standing in line going through the border to get to see one of the agents there. I realize now I could have used my passport to go through the e-gates, but somebody there told me that I couldn't. So I stood in this long line to get in. Anyway, I get up to the agent and, and he wants to know where I'm going. And I'm going, well, I'm going to tailoring school in Macclesfield. And the guy was so funny. He said, oh, I'm so terribly sorry. and, and, and tell me more. And I said, well, there's a tailoring school in Macclesfield. And he goes, I had no idea. He goes, I had no idea. And he said, just, I said, do I need to get my passport stamped? And he said something like, oh God, he said, just go. And then I was in. And then I was in. Man, it was just, people were so kind, were so, I don't know. So it was just great. It was so obvious I didn't know where the hell I was or what I was doing. And, I had to catch a tram to get to Manchester, Piccadilly, and people were just so helpful. It's just like, here, this is how you do it, And I ended up in Macclesfield, and Britta has a friend who's like an architect, designer, and I must have purchased what used to be an old pub in Macclesfield and converted it into 6 like individual rooms, each with their own ensuite and a big communal kitchen and a living area. And we had a little courtyard. And so 6 of us, the international students, all lived together in this house. And of course, I was old enough to be their grandfather, maybe their great grandfather. I don't know. They were all, they were all, they were all recent graduates. They, from a design school or had like a fashion background. They were all, very young, super talented, and and we lived together in this great house. It was just it was just so great to be, first of all, surrounded by a lot of really young, enthusiastic people, but that we all shared like a common bond and that we love making stuff, right? And that we really want to be doing this kind of work. So to just be surrounded by, that kind of energy all the time was just an indescribable joy for me anyway. It was just, and but we worked really hard. I gotta say, we worked hard. um it's not, I don't think that the Tailoring Academy is not, it's not, they're very serious there. And um it's not all fun and games. Just a lot of hard work involved. And so to be able to share in the in the highs and the lows of learning how to tailor, with a bunch of other people was just really great. I think about it all the time. All the time I'm thinking about
So
it.
you'd done the online Zoom course before you arrived here.
Yeah.
What was different when you actually came into the actual academy?
Oof. Um, I think uh, I think it was just how really fast things were moving. It was like, um, I think the first day we had sort of a safety drill, sort of, right? Learn where the fire escape is. Um, and we were given like an introduction on how to use the industrial sewing machines that they have. Um, you know, and we're sort of assigned our own workbenches. But it was just like that. We might that was like an easy day.
Mm.
It's like the next day it was like boom, okay, here we go. right? And we just started immediately like drafting a jacket.
Oh,
And we were, we just like, it's 6 hours a day. So we would meet for 3 hours in the morning and then 3 hours in the afternoon. And it was just like, before you know it, we had drafted a jacket, and it was like, okay, you better get your fabric because tomorrow we're going to cut it out. And it was just like, it would the pace was really fast. It was just you were just going all the time. So a lot of us, were like scrambling to get fabric to make a jacket. Um, and, we found out about how packages get delivered in the UK. There was a there was like a hairdressing salon next door to our house. And it's like we weren't ever home, right? We were always at
yeah.
school. So most of our packages got delivered to the hair salon next door. So we would go next door and say, "Oh, I live at number 4. Do you have any packages for us?" And they would just, they would just hold our packages. I mean, that would never, ever, ever happen here in the United States. That you would never have a package delivered next door to you. So that was just, it's just something that we all learned. That was just so incredible. So anyway, you get your fabric, and then boom, boom, boom. It's like, okay, figure out how to lay this all out, and and just the pace. All I can say is the pace is really fast, and and there's an expectation every we how can I put this? Okay, class was Monday through Thursday, and Friday was an optional day. Um, and and Friday was the day like that you could get caught up, because on Thursday you would get an email telling you where you were expected to be on Monday.
Oh,
You have to have this much accomplished, right? Because we're not stopping. We're not, we don't go backwards. We don't redo anything. So Friday, I I almost inevitably ended up in there on Friday just to get myself ready to go again on Monday morning, so that I would be all caught up and have everything ready to go. It was it was challenging, but um, but everybody else is there on Friday, so so and I don't know how to describe it. It becomes really evident as as the days and weeks kind of go by, um, that I guess I meant to back up a little bit. The demonstrations that you're seeing are real garments that are being made for people. So none of it's not like it's not like pretend, or it's not like a simulation of making a tailored garment. Your instructors are actually making a, in this case, it was a jacket that we started with. They are actually making a jacket for a real customer,
mm,
and so it's all it's very reality based, right? So it's not just theory. It's just like real. It's like real work, and you see how precise and the attention to detail that your instructors are putting into what they're working on as like a demonstration for you. And so you kind of pick up very quickly this attitude of just always trying to be that much better, to be more precise, to be, to just up your game, right? Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, it does.
You're always trying to just be better. It's like, I don't know. It's like it's out. It's one of those things that's out there, right? It's out there, and you're just trying to reach for it. And you see your instructors doing it, and you see them doing stuff over again as well. They might have been. doing some kind of demonstration, and in the end, Quentin would say, I'm not really happy with how this turns out, so I'm going to undo this and redo it, and we'll regroup in an hour or something like that. So they also foster, I think, sort of a desire to just be better, to try to, to just try to, I don't know what the word is, that you just want to nail it, right? You just want, yeah.
Do you think the aspect of speed was something they were trying to instill in you as well? Because a slow tailor will never make any money.
Yeah. Oh God, I was so slow. Oh God, I'm still slow. I don't know. I think it was just the amount of information that they're trying to deliver, right? It's just, and you're never going to get it all, right? There's so much. There's so much. It's like, I remember asking Britta. Um, I said, I want to learn how to make like a patch pocket. And her response to me was like, well, you really already do know how to do that. And I kind of must have looked at her like, what? And so she said, again, she said, you actually already know how to do that. And she went, into one of the other rooms at the academy and pulled out a jacket. It was kind of like a safari type jacket with a lot of pockets on it. And she put it on a dummy that was behind my workbench. And she said, and it was kind of like, she said, well, it was like, I want you to like study this, and you will be able to, you will figure this out on your own, kind of. So, there was always, it was kind of a challenge she was kind of throwing my way. It's like, you know what? Here you go. You can figure this out. And she was right. I really did pretty much know how to make it already. I just needed I needed a little bit more information. And by having a garment to look at, I was able to figure that out. But there's just so much material to cover, that I think that they have all they can do to just get it all in. It's a ton of stuff. Um, uh, Being an international student was really great, because we had, as international students, we didn't follow the same track that the UK students did. They did some other, they had some written work that we didn't have to do. Yay! But they also covered a jacket, pair of trousers, and a waistcoat, but they did it in a different order. So once we finished the jacket, we came back from like a Christmas break, and the international students, we had like 6 weeks of total freedom. We weren't going to have any. We didn't have any instruction. We were just told that we should just make a second jacket using what we had already learned, and that and so we just kind of got cut loose. We could, make whatever we wanted. So, most of us decided that we wanted to make some kind of like a plaid jacket, something that required matching, because that's a whole other can of worms there. And so we had 6 weeks all to ourselves, to use, what we had learned to make another jacket. So there were some advantages to being international students. We had 2 periods like that. We had 2 6-week periods where we could do whatever we wanted to do, which was just great. I ended up making 4 jackets while I was there.
Do you make everything to your own size so you can use it?
Exactly, right? But each one was a little bit different, right? And so I got to try, some different things. And they were also very, the course is very it's very British. Can I say it's very British? I mean, they they have their own style, right? It's very, with the shoulder pads and the chest, all the chest padding and stuff. Um, so I decided I wanted to make like a linen safari jacket thing, with with a drawstring in it, no less. But they were, they were totally supportive of what I was trying to do. I, which was way outside of what they teach and what they do. But we were just encouraged, we're encouraged to, do different things, and we had the time and the opportunity to do it. Um, so I just knew it was like a once in a lifetime thing, and I just was just gonna do as much stuff as I possibly could. So,
So in all, you were there for 12 months.
well, it's 10 and a half, actually. They need to have a vacation. They have a vacation break, for the month of August. So, so yeah, we started in September and ended sort of in the middle of July. Yeah. Yeah.
So what did you end up in all making during that period?
I
I mean, what
I
you
made
made and what you
okay,
can make.
I made four I made four jackets. I made two waistcoats and one pair of trousers. I'm I don't know. The trousers since being there, I've come back and I've actually made myself two pairs of trousers. I just, I didn't I have to say it's my least favorite garment to make. I guess can we have favorites in
Yeah, I
tailoring?
mean, yeah.
It's my least it's my least favorite garment to make. And but I came back and I thought, I just need to really I need to be more proficient at this. Of course we and so I've made a couple pair, since school. It's hard to believe it was 3 years ago. The time has like flown by. But um, and as I've been doing it, I've been kind of adding to my notes. We were, a part of the course, a big part of the course, is what they call it the portfolio. But basically, what you're doing is you're writing your own tailoring textbook for yourself, and so, I thought I need to be more proficient making trousers. So, I continue to kind of add to, my, if you want to call it my directions or my personal textbook on how to make tailored trousers. So it was a good experience because it just helped me, um, kind of get all the steps in a logical order so that I can just make them more efficiently. Uh, you know, part of uh, uh, Brit is very one of our assignments was, to make like to make a process. Britta called it a process flow, I think.
Okay.
Um, to that you should be able to put all the steps in order so that when it comes time to do this, like say to make, make a pocket, an interior pocket, say like an interior pocket on a coat, that you would you would have all the steps, boom, 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 to just make the whole process easier for yourself. And that has kind of stuck with me. And I've continued as I've, worked on projects since leaving the academy. I'm all, I have spent time trying to make my own process, to write down my own process so that I can just be a little bit more efficient every time I set out to work on something.
Well,
Anyway.
I think efficiency must be pretty key, both in or do you do things in that you're remembering to do everything, that you're cutting the cloth in a proper way? And if you're inefficient in any of this, you're going to be redoing things. You could be.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And it's just good to just, um, to have all the dimensions. I gotta say, I I saw like a little clip, a little reel, of like must I don't know where this is, but it's like it's like sewing is done by robots now, right? A lot of our clothes are made, robotically almost, and they're making like one of those interior pockets, you know, and the whole thing is done in like 30 seconds,
Wow.
and it takes me like 2 hours. It takes me like 2 hours to do that. It's just like, but
Hmm.
but so I just have things where I have the dimensions of all the little bits and pieces that go into that, and and then just the steps to do it. But we're not machines, right? As as in this tailoring world, we don't have a machine that can crank that can do all of that in 30 seconds. So it takes a lot of time to be, because it's a precision job, right? You want it to look good in the end, and um, so it all takes time. It all takes time.
When you were in Macclesfield, you must finally have had access to the sort of fabrics you'd been dreaming of.
Oh boy, did we ever. Yeah. We got to go on a couple field trips while we were there. And, we went to Abraham Moon, which is in Guiseley. And it's like one of the last vertical uh, mills in the UK. And they do it all. So we started like from the loading dock, where there were huge bales of wool that are coming in from either New Zealand or Australia, and they go from that, they go to dyeing it themselves, and then it's all spun and then eventually woven, all in one facility. And it was just mind boggling. And they make beautiful they make beautiful fabric. I ended up one of my first real bespoke clients that I got here in Maine since coming back, um, chose a Moon fabric, um, and I hope he's really happy with his jacket. I think it turned out pretty good, but um, so yeah, we had access to fabrics and also supplies that are almost impossible to find here in the United States. Um, so yeah, we were very lucky. I brought some stuff back with me. I knew that there were some things that I was never going to be able to find. So I made room in my luggage by taking some of my clothes to a charity shop and packing like tailoring supplies in my in my luggage to bring home. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so right now, what are your favourite fabrics?
Wow. I've been really lucky since coming back. I could, are you finding out that I can talk a lot about all of this? Um, I've, I've been very lucky that, um, a really great menswear, store in Portland, Maine, which is about, I don't know, about 45 minutes away, 45 minutes to an hour away, um, has been really supportive of what I do. And and they sell really great clothes that you really can't find any other place. But they do a big wedding business. They have like made to measure service there. um and so they use a lot of Holland and Sherry. And so they have like I sort of commissioned some outerwear from me. They expressed an interest. They say, "Man, we have a really hard time finding really interesting outerwear. Would you want to make some stuff for us? And I'd go, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that. So they're big Holland and Sherry fans, and so they would order the fabric and have it sent to me. I developed like a raglan sleeve overcoat for them. One thing about going to the Tailoring Academy is that it kind of gave me the courage to to be able to draft my own patterns, to draft my own code, right? So I, with some help of some textbooks, I was able to, draft like a raglan sleeve overcoat, um, because it doesn't require a lot of fitting,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of a slouchy look, and so they're big Holland and Sherry tweed fans. So they would have the fabric and a lining fabric sent to me, and I make it. And and I think they've sold three of them, three a jacket and two overcoats that I've made for them, which has been really great. It's just been I've been so lucky, so lucky. Um, so yeah, I just got okay. So this is I'm gonna take kind of let the cat out of the bag here. I'm actually gonna do like a little runway presentation in June. This
Okay.
is you're the first one to hear about
Uh-huh.
this. Okay. So I got approached by the Maine Crafts Association to participate in their annual runway show, which is a fundraiser for them. And they invite like 6 fiber artists here from the state of Maine to do like a runway collection. And so I need to have like 6 looks ready for June 4th. So I am busy right now. So I'm pretty busy right now. Pretty busy right now. So I am trying to, come up with these 6 garments, and I'm working on the third one right now. And so I've just been super busy. Um, but uh, anyway, I went to a fabric trade show and I ran into McGee, who is like the Donegal tweed maker in Ireland.
The largest, I think.
And yeah, and so I just got a shipment from them. I'm going to be, actually, I'm going to be making like a Donegal toggle coat. I'm going to use the, I'm going to use the raglan sleeve coat, and I'm going to put some toggles on it. It's going to be beautiful. The fabric is gorgeous, and so since coming back, I've managed to make some inroads in with different fabric people. It's really hard. I gotta say, it's really hard when you're like a kind of like a nobody, and you're just trying to get started, right? To be taken seriously can be really challenging. And we see pictures of these tailoring places, and they have a whole wall full of all the books, all the bunch books,
Yeah.
right, all hanging with their. And I'll tell you, those books are hard to get if you're if you're just if you're like just starting out. I mean, you are like begging, right? You're going, God, could you please send me one? It's hard. It can be challenging, but the people at McGee and Holland and Sherry have been really generous, and they all also McGee and Moon, they have like a stock service, so they have certain fabrics that they have all the time,
Yeah.
right? And so it makes it just really easy to present those to potential clients, knowing that yes, you can really get this fabric.
Yeah.
I'm working with a father of the bride right now, um, and we're really just getting started. But he wanted like a Holland and Sherry tweed suit because it's going to be a fall wedding, and wouldn't you know it, one of the fabrics that he picked is no longer available. I mean, these things don't last forever,
Ah,
which was kind of which was kind of was hard. And then that just leaves me like I had to scramble a little bit, like going, man, I got to find something that was sort of like what he wanted. Right. First, I reached out to Holland and Sherry. They must think I'm so stupid. Anyway, I reached out to them and I just said, all I need is a yard. He just wants a waistcoat. Do you know anybody that maybe had purchased this? Maybe a tailoring place that, maybe purchased like 5 meters of this just to have, that they might be willing to sell to
uh,
me. And they must have thought, oh my God, this guy is out of his mind. Anyway, anyway, I was able to find something that looked very similar to what he originally wanted. I think he's going to be really happy with it. But finding the whole fabric thing can be really challenging. Can really be challenging for somebody like me for anybody who's just trying to get started. It can be rough. Yeah.
there's also so many variants of fabric available now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just it's kind of overwhelming, you know, I I ended up my very first real true, real bespoke customer uh came to me. We met in a coffee shop, and he had a men's, I guess, some kind of men's fashion magazine. I never saw the cover, so I don't know what it was. He shows me this picture of like this huge, oversized, bright yellow, like almost like a raincoat, like a big, like a here we would call it like a barn jacket,
Right.
right? It had a corduroy collar and cuffs, bright yellow, huge, oversized, kind of gusseted pockets on it. And he said, I want something like this. And I thought, I have to say, my first impression was I thought, maybe this guy is really just joking with me. Maybe he's really not serious. Is he pulling my leg
I have an
here?
idea there, but continue.
But he wasn't. He wanted that. And I really had to search to find like a bright yellow fabric that that he liked. Um, and eventually I located one. I think it was really originally intended, probably for like men's like summer trousers, maybe,
Mhm.
to go with like a blue blazer or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, ended up making that, and and it was I had so much fun working with that guy. It was really fun. And I think he wore it. He has a place here in Maine. He also has a place in New York, and I think he wore it to the Easter parade on Fifth Avenue in New York City. He was hoping that somebody would take a picture, but he sent me he that he'd end up in the New York Times or something. But he sent me this really great email one day. It was just really brief, and he goes, I was in New York over the weekend, and I think I had like 6 people say, "Man, I really like your style." And that just like made my day. I just like, man, that is really great when you get to make something for somebody, and they get so much joy out of wearing it, right?
It's also
It's a,
incredibly rare for people to comment on your clothes like that. I mean, it drives me crazy when never any response when I put proper effort into it.
yeah,
When I was in
yeah,
Manchester in the autumn, and I was walking around town with a friend of mine, and he was wearing this massive greatcoat, sort of army greatcoat,
okay.
and he had, was it 7 or 8 people that day who told him how great the coat was. It was like, really?
Yeah. Well, I don't you think it's just to just see something that's really
Yeah.
different, right? to just, something that is not a black puffer jacket
No,
is just like a real oh, maybe that was a bad thing to
no,
say.
no. But
But, but just to see somebody who's like really wearing something that's really different, you know, is it's kind of it's a treat,
mm,
right? It's kind of a treat to see somebody, that's wearing something that you haven't seen a million
yeah.
times.
The
Yeah.
idea I had when you were talking about this guy initially who wanted this yellow, huge, oversized raglan coat was how many of us tend to look for items like that, the sort of shiny, different things, and will be crazy for them with no regard for how it might work with the rest of our wardrobe. And you
Yeah.
risk buying quite a few of these items, and you realize that you've got nothing really to wear them with, so you never really use them. It sounded like that, but then I realized that he had actually had wear out of it, which was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. But I can totally identify with what you just said because, when you learn to make your own clothes, it's easy to fall into making really crazy stuff. And, because, you would look at something and you go, man, I think I can make that. And then you go ahead and you make it and you go,
Oh,
man, this is so not me. do you do you know like the brand, oh now I'm not going to remember it. Engineered Garments.
yes. Well,
Do you know? Yeah, yeah. And it's like I love their style, right? But and so I decided they had this period. I don't know if they still make them. They made what looked to me like almost like I would call it like a fishing vest. This little vest with all these pockets
yeah,
on
they
it and
still do
all this
them.
stuff. And yeah, and I thought, oh man, that is so cool. And so I went ahead and made something like that. And it just sits in the
Oh,
closet. It's just like I just go, man, I look so stupid in
I
that.
made one in a fantastic Harris tweed with the big pockets and all that. It's great.
Okay. I just can't I just can't pull it off. It was fun to make, but I've learned a little bit about myself and what I feel comfortable wearing,
Yeah,
you
well, there's
know,
that.
right? It's just like I don't it was fun to make and I liked the idea of it, but I didn't really feel comfortable wearing it. I didn't feel like I was really myself at all.
Mm.
So so it sits in the closet.
That's the weird thing. I often call that the hat principle, because if I've got a few hats which I really like, but if I
uh,
take one to town on Saturday intending to wear it, the first 5 minutes or so are really awkward because I feel as if the world is looking at me and judging my hat. Then after 5 or 10 minutes, I forget I've got it on, and it's just fine.
okay.
And I think
Okay.
it's like that with a lot of clothes. That if you can just wear it a little bit and forget you're wearing it, and
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have made that fishing vest out of I think I made it out of like a pink Oxford
That
cloth
may be the
with
problem.
maybe that was part of maybe that was part of the
If
problem.
you'd made it in a checked Melton wool, sort of a Maine hunting jacket, or a tweed or something, but yeah, a pink Oxford. Yeah, I think that's the
Maybe it
problem.
would have might have been more successful. Yeah. Yeah. Like
But
yeah, like right now for this runway show, I'm kind of making a version of like a jean jacket,
Mhm.
which is not, I don't own one, but I have this really great Italian wool that I found. Actually, I found it when I was trying to find the replacement wool for Mr. Father of the Bride. I found this other fabric. It's really beautiful, kind of teal, all wool, must be merino. It's super soft. So I'm gonna make kind of like a jean jacket out of it, kind of an upscale jean jacket out of it. which I think would be kind of fun. Yeah.
I mean, that is
So
the advantage of being able to make things yourself. You can make exactly what you want. You're not beholden to fashions or other people's taste or
yeah, yeah, and I just want to, I want it for this runway show. I just want to, life. We're lucky here in Maine. It's a pretty casual place to live. Um, and it's very rural where I am, and so you don't see people all dressed up, but I just think kind of like a practical garment, like a jean jacket that's easy to just throw on, but just like kick it up a notch and just make it, out of a nicer fabric.
yeah.
Um, this is going to have like a viscose lining inside, that has images of like jazz musicians, I think, on the inside. Gonna be kind
Well,
of,
I mean,
yeah, but it's
for a
fun.
runway show, you do want things to be noticed. If you'd made a denim jacket
Me
in
too.
denim, no one would have noticed it.
Yeah, right, right. And it's just it's a style that I haven't. I have to say I've been trying to draft it over the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. I think I finally got it. So the first time around, it was so small. I just have one. We called them dummies at the Tailoring Academy, but like a
Yeah.
mannequin. So you know, um, I have a size 40 mannequin, and I made like a mock-up of this thing, and it didn't even fit on. It didn't even fit the mannequin, let alone a real human being. So it's been kind of a challenge, but it's going to get there, and hopefully I can wrap it up in the next couple of weeks. And then I just got to move on to the next thing, right? So I've got basically I need to crank out a garment a month here, and you know I think I try to incorporate a lot of the technique that I learned at the Tailoring Academy into the garments that, even the outerwear garments that I'm making. That all the technique kind of flows over. And I just want the construction to be as good as I can possibly make it. I want these clothes to last.
Mm.
That's like a big driver of what I'm doing. Is like I want clothes that really could potentially last like a person's whole lifetime, as long as they took care of them. I just want stuff to be in a style that lasts, and using great fabrics and just using the really good solid technique inside that nobody sees,
And it,
right? But I just want them to
I notice you
last.
say a style that lasts because there's a lot of talk now about timeless styles or timeless designs. And do you think something like that really exists?
Uh, I think to me, yes, right? I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. I think, the raglan coat that I've made, I think is a I think it's a timeless style. I don't it's not very common.
No.
I You don't
I
see it.
think that might be a point. Yeah.
I don't I'm also, since I've learned to make my own clothes, I'm not a shopper. That's the other right? It's just like I don't go to stores. I don't really see what's out. I don't see what's out there, right? But um I think it's kind of a timeless style, I guess. I mean, I don't know if you I do you look bother to even look at like menswear runway
No.
stuff? I just I don't know. It just like every once in a while I'll see, some crazy design from Dior or wherever, and it's just like I just I don't know. I just go, God, this is such a. I feel sorry for the people that end up having to make these things. It's like, some human being actually had to make that crazy jacket that doesn't fit, and I just feel sorry that all their effort. effort is wasted on something that to me is so foolish. But that's just I shouldn't be that judgmental.
Oh, I think
But I
it's
don't.
okay to say the truth. I mean,
But so I don't bother to look at. I don't bother to look at. It's like I don't bother to really look at it. Um, I'm I don't
I
know.
think
And plus I'm also a very conservative dresser. So I'm I you know, I'm not really interested in a lot of what the big name designers are doing.
I
Yeah.
think timeless. I mean, I think it helps if you're not chasing fashion, because the moment you're trying
Yeah.
to follow fashion, you will also drop out of fashion. But if you instead of focus on making nice things and make them durably out of good fabrics, then you might be talking more timeless.
I think so. I think I'm also trying to make clothes that are appropriate for the climate that I'm living in as well. It's like this is a cold place in New England in the wintertime. So, um, summer is really short. Um, and so to like be making like some type of a jean jacket that can be worn in the spring and in the fall just makes to me it makes sense. To me it makes sense, I guess. That's what I'm saying, and to make like a longer overcoat. Also, it makes sense. It just makes sense for the climate that we live in. Um, and I also like big swishy coats. I think that's
Big coats are great and
I-
practical.
yeah, um yeah, I'm just trying to make good stuff. I'm just trying to make good stuff. That's all.
That
Yeah.
brings me to something that bothers me, because I've made a fair amount of stuff, but I never really think it's any good. So I have this whole rack downstairs of stuff that I've made that has never really been worn, and it's just hanging there. It's just I mean, objectively, I don't think it's terrible, but I just don't. Once I'd finished making it, my interest was gone. But at what
Okay.
point did you realise that what you were making was actually good enough for you to wear, or was that the first garment?
Um uh wow. Um Gee, the first thing that I made was the toggle coat and I thought it came out really great. So I've worn I have I'm trying to think if I made things. Well, I have, you know, the things that have not lasted or that I don't wear are clothes that were really made out of really awful fabric, really cheap fabric,
No.
right? And um eventually I don't know, the light bulb went on or something that if I was going to spend all the time and effort to try to make something, that I should just use the best fabric that I can
Yeah.
buy, and that I'm not going to be, going to the bargain bin looking for, something that's only, a few dollars a yard or something like that. So, the things that I don't wear and that have not, you know, that I don't want to wear it's always been the fabric, I think, that has been its downfall. It's just like, man, that was really cheesy, like that was really crappy fabric. That was like the pea coat, right? The fabric was just awful. And, you know, it's easy, it's I don't know. I was easily fooled. I thought it was wool, but it really wasn't. And it started to pill under the arms,
Yeah.
where your arms where the God, it looked so bad. Um, and also I couldn't press it or couldn't, it just really I was hard to press. So yeah, I think but other than that, most of the stuff I've made, I wear it. I yeah. I don't know. I have pretty much a me-made wardrobe now. I pretty much everything except my socks and my underwear. That there you have to draw the line
Yeah.
somewhere. That's where I draw the
Yeah.
line.
Do
But
do people who
yeah,
don't know you comment on what you're wearing?
I've had a woman say, yeah, they have. I went to I think I was wearing the toggle coat. Yeah. And I had a scarf on or something like that, and a woman in the grocery store said, "Man, I really love you have great style. You look very stylish today," or something like that. It's like, wow, thank you.
Huh.
Yeah.
Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned right back at the start that your daughter also studied fashion.
Oh, yeah.
What are the sort of intersects between what you're doing now and what she's doing?
Oh boy, if you only knew.
Well,
All right. So, all right, you're gonna find out. Okay. Um, so she started as a fashion design major, and she was going to what I would consider a pretty avant-garde art college. Um, and after I think she was there for she was there for 3 semesters, and she called me and said, "Dad, I don't think I want to go back for the spring semester." She goes, I'm not really happy in this fashion department." And she said, I don't really have any friends in this department." And I said, "Well, it kind of tells you something, I guess." She said, "I think I just need to stop going to school for a while and rethink this." And so she took some time off and decided to go back as a textile major because that was the part that really excited her, or that where she really felt like she was in her space. So she went back and graduated as a textile major, and now is she is a designer for a puppet company, a major puppet company
okay.
called Folk called Folk Manus Puppets. And it's like, for her, I think it's like her dream job. She has a studio at their facility, which is like in the Bay Area out near San Francisco. Um, and she she you know she designs like puppets, and their forte is like animals. All of their puppets look like real things. So if it's, they have all different kinds of dogs, and all of them. It's their that's their niche, and they're beautifully made. They're all made in Vietnam, I think now. But she does like just what I do, like to make, a garment. She makes little tiny little paper patterns. She sews together these things. They go off. They make a prototype. It comes back, and then they will produce like 10,000 of them. Um, so yeah, so she left fashion, and now she's a full time puppet designer. Um, some of the days they have a child, a little baby. Um, some days she's able to work at home. She can, design patterns. And cut them out and sew them up. I imagine on her home sewing machine on the dining room table. And then, other days, they have childcare, and she goes into her studio to work. But yeah, uh, so I have a very creative child, and then my son is in healthcare. So um, I don't know. I'm a hybrid of the two of them, I guess. I don't know what to say.
Making puppets, that
But
sounds
anyway,
brilliant. There's so many worse
yeah,
jobs you could be doing today. Probably
yeah,
brings joy to
yeah,
many. You also
yeah,
mentioned about the tailoring school. You mentioned there were highs and lows.
yeah.
Any good highs and lows that sort of come to mind?
wow. High. Oh, it was a high. Wow. I'm trying to think. I don't know. It was just,
I guess
I
the
don't
lows
know.
are
It was just
dredging
like,
up bad
I don't
memories.
know. It was just a, it was just, no, it was just like be, being surrounded by so many talented people, right? It's just its own special kind of high to me. It's just, you know, um, in between all of the hard work, we also had fun, right? We also had, you know, we had fun, right? And uh, uh, it was just, I don't know. It's just hard to describe what it's like to just be doing that. Being a student and being doing it all the time. I think one of the low point was, you know, it's also school,
Yeah.
right? So, you have certain benchmarks that you have to meet. And we had a thing that was called was it was online. It was called the checklist, and you had to be able to document that you had done all of these various things. And you either had to, you could document it through a photograph, you could document it by, referencing a page in your textbook that you're writing for yourself. Um, but it was sort of it was the sort of thing that every you would just kind of groan. It was like every once in a while, Britta would want to meet with you to see how you were progressing, filling out this checklist, because you had to complete every single thing on it. And it went on for pages and pages. Uh, so that was, I think, a low point, right? Just trying to document that you actually had done certain steps, or that you had done something. It was like, it's just so much more fun to be making stuff and not documenting about it. So that was not fun. Uh, High points. Um,
I
wow.
think I get what you were saying about how it was so fun being there, and I wonder if you had a different experience of that than the people who just come out of college or whatever. Because I often think that, I mean, we tend to sort of pick the career for the rest of our lives when we're about 16. That's when we're set on the path that we will follow.
Yeah.
And at that age, you really have no clue what you will really enjoy doing. You don't know yourself. I mean, it's a crapshoot. But
Yeah.
having the
Yeah.
opportunity then at a more advanced stage, when you've actually worked most of your life, to go back and do something really inspiring again.
Yeah, I mean, who gets so many how many people do that?
Not
How many
many at
people
all.
do that? Not many, right? Um, and I feel so sorry for people that just don't have any interests, right? That, are retired and don't seem to be interested in much of anything. That to me seems tragic. But um, yeah, uh, I don't, I it's so hard. It's hard to know what other people's um, motivation was to go there, right? Um, I I just really wanted to know I just wanted to know everything, and I never will. I realize that I'll never really be able to know it all. But um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. I can't really answer it. I'm it's a it's a tough industry, especially, for coming back to the US after being there. Um, it's really challenging to find, what where you fit in. And it's like I have to realize that I'm lucky because I'm retired and and I'm not, depending on this for my livelihood, right? It's basic, mostly it's just like I just love doing the work, and I also earn some money doing it, right? That I can,
Yeah.
and so, but I'm not depending on it, to house me and feed me and clothe me. And so it's it's challenging for, everybody coming back to the United States to figure out what they can do with it. Mostly, I know, one of my classmates, you know, if you go to like a menswear store or tailoring place, it's like they just want you to do their alterations. They just want you to hem
Yeah.
pants and shorten coat sleeves, right? And it's really hard to break into, like, the sort of, I can do more than that, right? I can do a lot more than just hem pants here, right? And so I've been really lucky that I found a store that really wants to provide something extraordinary for their customers. That's what it takes. It takes somebody with some imagination. The owner of the store that I'm working with, it's called David Wood Clothiers, and they've been in business since like the 1970s here in Maine. So they're well established, but their owner she's highly creative, and she's always thinking about what can we do to make to add a little bit, to add something special. A lot of times it involves other craftspeople, um, that she works with, that make things for the shop. It takes it takes a place with a lot of imagination, and I have just been really lucky to land there. I went to a couple other menswear stores, um, and they could have cared less about what I had to offer them. I was just like, you know, they had like a made to measure service, and they they didn't see any need to have anybody that could, do like a custom bespoke thing for their customers. They weren't the least bit interested. I was just very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that is one of the ways that brick and mortar shops can compete today, by providing sort of experience you just can't get online.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the I've had how many boom, boom, boom. I'm working with my fourth real 100% bespoke client right now. So, in 3 years I've had four. But it's for these men, they're all men. Although you know, I've been given instructions to do like a female jacket and female trousers and all that, but I didn't do it in school, and I probably I probably never will. But so the customers that I have had, it's it is also more than just the clothes. It's also about the whole experience, and that excites them, right? They all, they they like being able to pick out their own fabric or their own buttons, or pick out their own lining. They get to play their own designer. Um, and I just try, I want them to have not only, really, really great clothes, I want them to have a really fun experience. I want that for them. And I think they also like know, knowing kind of like the story behind their clothes, where it's come from, that it was made by a real person, that there's a storyline that's also like important to them. Um, and so I've been lucky that I've been able to connect with some people that think that way. Um, in fact, one of the one of the men who actually who bought one of the raglan sleeve overcoats, actually, I don't know if he convinced or or introduced me to his father-in-law, who ended up buying a jacket from that I had made. And so there, it's like it's about there's a certain connection there, right? It's just like, oh man, this guy Duane made my coat. Look what else he made. You should get one of his things. And his father-in-law bought a jacket. So they love that there's a story, I think, and that there's like a real person behind it.
I
Does
think
that
if
make
you're the sort
sense?
of guy who, or the sort of person who likes to have special things, things you can really appreciate, then that is a
Yeah,
good way of making a greater connection. I often feel when I'm visiting shopping malls and the like, and I just see there's just so much stuff for sale everywhere. It's just piled high, and it's all just meaningless tat that will just be purchased and probably almost immediately thrown away. There's just no connection or
right,
meaning in it. And I wonder,
right.
how do we own things that are actually more meaningful and important to us?
Mm, I think the man that bought the overcoat, it is really meaningful to him because first of all, and maybe primarily, it's a one-off. Nobody else is ever gonna have it, right? It's totally 100% unique, and he he loves. I don't know. He loves it. He loves wearing it. In fact, he ended up losing some weight, a considerable amount of weight, and so he wanted it altered. And sort of in the bespoke world, it's like, yeah, that I'm here for you, right? It's like I can't walk away from it. And that's part of the service, right? Is that I'm here to service this garment eh, for you for as long as you own it. That was, something that we learned at the Tailoring Academy. It's like that's part of the part. I don't know. Can you say it's part of the shtick? It's just part. Of, it's part. It's part of the deal, right?
Mm.
It's just like you're there to stand behind. You're there to stand behind it, and if it needs repair, if it needs alteration, whatever, it should come back to you, right? And so he had lost a considerable amount of weight and he wanted it taken in. And it was like, yeah, I'm here for you. It was it was and it wasn't I'm not an alterations person, I can tell you that. Because to take that coat apart, luckily, as a bespoke garment, it has a big generous inlay in it. In case he went the other way and had gained weight, I could have let it out, but he wanted it taken in. So I didn't touch any of that. So it has even more inlay in it now than it had before. But it could be, that coat could be altered, multiple times over its lifespan. And that's part of the deal. That's part of that's part of the whole thing.
Someone told me recently that the current trend of weight loss drugs has caused real problems for the British tailoring industry because all the larger gentlemen who have had bespoke suits made are now coming back and wanting them slimmed in.
Slow down. Yes. I read a similar article in the New York Times, like on Wall Street here in New York City. There's the same thing. Tailors are in high demand to alter all of the executive suits that have lost weight with all of these drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means that they're downgraded to alterations tailors or it means that they're not having any new suits ordered or
I don't know. I would be handing that off to somebody else because I'll tell you, I hate doing the alterations. Uh, I did one as a as sort of a friendly gift to an old coworker. Her soon to be son-in-law, um, had a suit for his wedding and it needed some alterations. And I agreed to do it, and I I learned right then and there that this is not something that I want to be caught doing all the time. But there are people that are really expert at it. There are, and I just tell people, people have come to me, you know, asking, and I just go, I'm really not an alterations expert. There are other people that are just so much better at this than I am. So you should really try to find somebody else. Yeah.
I think that's fair. It is a
Yeah.
quite a different job, really.
It is very, and you really need to know what you're doing. And, you're, I just felt like I was diving into the unknown. You have no idea what's hiding inside there, right?
Right.
And luckily in this guy, in my alteration guys, he needed it taken in. There was zero inlay in his jacket, so if it ever needed to be let out, there was no way, there was
Mm.
no fabric to do anything with it. So luckily he was going in the other direction. He wanted it taken in, so there was some stuff to work with. But i I don't want to make a habit of
That
it.
is a big change, though, from how we used to make clothes and how they're made today. It used to be that clothes were made in such a way that they could be taken in or out because the human body
Yeah,
just changed shape over the years.
right. Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised. There was probably a centimeter of seam allowance in this jacket everywhere. So there was no extra fabric, to let that out at all. Um, yeah. Um, I don't buy a lot of ready-made clothes, so I don't know really much about what's inside them. I just make everything myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So that means that if I was to ask you about how do the clothes you make for yourself compare to your typical shop clothes, I mean, you'd have no idea.
Yeah. And but the clothes that I've made for myself, they I got to say they last and last. You know, I'm wearing the same shirts that I probably wore, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, right? They just hold up. They just hold up better. Um and and now I'm at the point where, I have enough clothes to wear. I just want to make stuff. I just want to make clothes for other people. That's that's where, that's sort of where I'm at now. And I still I have so much to learn about even doing that. Um, I have a one of my classmates, we chat frequently um about, just about our, the ups and downs, the problems that we have and stuff. And it's like, um, you know, I've I just need to get better. I just need to get better at certain things. It's like, a big part of the bespoke thing is in the fitting, doing a fitting. And I'm not particularly confident about that part of the process. And I need to I need to trust what I see, and what I'm marking more. One of my bespoke clients, um, when we did the fitting, I felt like the shoulder really needed to come in. It was way too wide in the shoulder, and and it needed to. I thought that it needed to come in like maybe three centimeters, which seemed like a lot to me. It just seemed like a lot. And in the end, it was like I didn't really trust it, and I thought, I think I'm going to back off, and maybe I'll just take it in like two. And I realize now that he's worn it several times. He doesn't notice it, but when I look at it, I I I notice it. And I just go, man, I should have really trusted my instinct there
Yeah.
because I still think that this is just a touch too wide. So, I just, it's all a learning experience. I just, every time I, go out, every time I meet somebody, I'm learning something. Um, and I just want to keep going. I just want to keep going that way, right? Just trying to really get more comfortable with it and just kind of really trust my gut instinct in places. Uh,
That is tricky though, because even in something as conservative as a suit jacket, there are tastes and styles and fashions, both
yeah.
regional and country wise, or just the tailoring house has their house style. You have your style. So, I mean, who's to really say that something is right or wrong?
Wow. I think it's just like a gut. I don't know. For me, it's like a gut
Yeah.
instinct. It's like here's another example. Okay, this is Mr. Father of I call these I have names for all of my
Okay.
all my okay, Mr. Father of the Bride. Okay. Um, I met and did his measurement and took his measurements. And again, it's just like I just go, oh darn it. I should have asked him if I could have maybe taken a few photographs of him, maybe a picture of him from the back, perhaps. Um, so I get back and I decide that I one of the things we did at the Tailoring Academy, we had to develop our own um, kind of, you have all these measurements and there's various mathematical computations that, some of the measurements in the draft are just calculations. It's a quarter of a half a back plus 2 centimeters. It's always some kind of crazy
Okay.
thing like that. Anyway, so I get back and I'm comparing like the length from like the nape of his neck down to like his waist in the back. And it just turns out that he's much longer there than what would be normally calculated,
Right.
what like the mathematical calculation would be. I think it was like, I don't know, maybe 7 centimeters, maybe. Just seems like a lot. And I thought, what do I do here? Do I make this fit him? Do I use this measurement or do I just use like what would normally be calculated? So I decided, you know what? Maybe I should just use his real measurement. I wrote to him and I said, I think you might have a really long torso. Do you have like problems keeping your shirts tucked in? Like,
Yeah.
but he didn't respond to
Oh.
that. Anyway, so I went ahead and I drafted it based on, what I had measured. But when I looked at the pattern piece that I had cut out for the front, I just had this gut instinct that it just didn't look, it just didn't look right. It was too, by, by changing that back measurement, it made everything longer. So, the stance of the jacket would have been, deeper and the pockets seemed low. And so I I actually I sent a text to Britta and said, Britta, I've got a problem. She always gets back to me, which I love. Um, and I said, here's what's happened. This guy I think he has a really long torso, and I'm not sure what to do, but it just doesn't look right. It just doesn't look right. And so she weighed in on it, and and I went ahead and I changed that measurement and redrafted it. And I think it's going to be fine now. But sometimes it's just like a gut. It's like a gut feeling. You look at it and you just go, man, there's something. This is off. There's something. This is not going to work. And I had a feeling that if I had gone ahead and cut that out and done a fitting, I don't think that this man would have liked it, because it would have been so different from any other jacket
Mm.
that he had, right? It was going to be really long through the front, and I think we're going to be good.
That's,
We haven't gotten
that's,
there
a,
yet,
that's
but
an
it's going to be okay.
interesting problem, though, because, I mean, were you going to make it for his actual body measurements, or
Yeah.
were you going to do it like the typical bespoke British tailor is said to do, where they correct your bodily imperfections, so they straighten your shoulder or they hide your massive tummy, or so
Yeah. Yeah.
there maybe you really lifted his waistline up to counteract his long torso
I
and
guess
make
we
him look
kind of,
more like a normal human.
Britta thought that she said, she's also been in that situation, and she said, I think what you need to do is that you just need to kind of split the difference here. And she said, if you when you get to the point of actually doing the fitting, if there's any if there's any bit that looks off to you, you should be able to correct it in the fitting. And I think, fitting was a big part of the Tailoring Academy. And, um, they had their own clients come in, and they would video the whole fitting process that they did with them. Um, and I still have them. They shared them, and so I still have all the videos of how they approached the whole fitting process, because it's almost, I think it's bigger than the actual making, in a way, because that's where you're really, kind of tweaking everything and really, really kind of perfecting it. Usually the draft is huge. I tell my clients, I go, just don't be alarmed. Do not be, don't be alarmed when I put this thing on you, because it tends to come out to be pretty generous in size, like the guy that, where the shoulder was way too wide. Um, so I think it's designed that way, right? Because you can take stuff away, but you can't glue it back on.
No.
So usually the draft is pretty generous. So I think what's happened with Mr. Father of the Bride, and if there's anything that's really off, I think I can correct it when I do the fitting. But that's that's a month away, maybe. I have other stuff to do in the meantime. But I'm just, but at least I've redone I redid his whole pattern, because just by changing that one measurement, it changes everything. Everything all of a sudden it's totally different. So I made sure that I threw the old pattern pieces away so that I don't get confused.
Mm, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you've got your runway show coming up. What
Yeah.
other things do you see in the future for Holdfast Bespoke?
Well, I'm hoping that through the runway show that I get some additional exposure. Um, I can't believe how hard I'm working here. It's like when I when I was at the academy, I told Britta, I said, I would be happy to make, like, two or three suits a year. And now all of a sudden here I am prepping for this runway show, and trying to make a three-piece suit for Mr. Father of the Bride, all at the same time. So it's like, I don't want to be working quite this hard. is, that, is that is that fair to say? I'd like to go, I would just like to go back to, making, I don't know, three or four things. I just, I'm retired. I
Uh,
shouldn't be up. I call this my sweatshop. I shouldn't be up here in the up here in the sweatshop, working like crazy every day.
I did
But
wonder about that when I was before we started recording. That, I mean, being a tailor, a busy tailor, is actually not easy work, is it? It is a hard job.
it is, yeah. I mean, you are you're trying to just, I feel that all the time that I'm working here, I'm trying to just be as good as I can possibly be. And so that's just the kind of the focus. And it's slow. It is slow work, but I do a lot of hand sewing. Um, but that's part of the that's also part of the whole deal, right? It's like all of the little individual hidden stitches that go into these garments are what really, I don't know, it's what sets it apart, right? It's like I I I can hear Britta's voice in my head right now. It's like um so much in tailoring is about creating shape using individual stitches, right? And I just remember Britta, in standing up in front of the class, holding up a canvas, saying, "Look, it's already taking shape. We're already creating shape." And that is such a big part of it. It's about creating a shape, a durable shape, by putting all of these individual hand stitches into it. Um, and so it's so, I don't know, it's all about, that's what it's about, right? Um, and it's, I don't know, it's a fun process for me, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just a lot of manual work. Yeah.
it is. In closing now, Duane, is there anything we should have
uh,
mentioned that we haven't talked about?
wow. I don't, man, I don't think so. I talk a lot. I don't know what you're going to do with all this. um,
It's all good.
yeah, I'm just gonna keep working. I'm looking forward to doing this runway thing. Not, for some exposure, but it's also fun for me, right? It's a creative endeavor, and I love that. I love that. I like making things. I like the creativity. Um, it's just been a really fun project, and I'm hoping I can pull it off. I just need to be able to pull it off. So um once the runway thing is over, I'll have some time to regroup and see what happens. You just don't know what happens. This is different. The runway show is different because there's not another person involved. That's another thing. I have loved, like, really meeting the guys that I have made for. They've all been really, really delightful people to meet. And and so that's a bonus to the whole process, is that I've also met just some really nice people. And it's just when you're retired and you don't have your work, you don't have your work group anymore, and you're working alone all the time. Just to have the opportunity to meet new people, meet interesting new people that are also interested in clothes, they're interested in what you do. um they're into the whole process, they're having a great time. I'm also having a great time. It's just a different experience for me, right? But it just has been very rewarding. It's just really rewarding, and I just want to keep it going.
Perfect. Perfect. You,
Okay.
you you sell the idea of becoming a bespoke tailor in
Yeah.
retirement as a very okay thing to do.
I mean, yeah, I just, every day is a new, every day is just like, okay, what can I accomplish today? I'm so psyched I've been swearing a lot with this jean jacket. The first time, I put it on my dummy, it didn't fit, but it's getting there today. And, I might even start cutting it out later today. And so, it's all good. It's all good.
And on that happy note, I think we'll say goodbye to Duane in his
Oh,
sweatshop.
Nick, this has been so great. Thank you so much for. I'm
You're
sorry, I
welcome.
just ramble on and on, but I'm sorry. I am really passionate about it. I just love the whole thing. It just really feeds me. It